Hey everyone, this is Jack from the Cardboard Herald, and today we are getting into my top 10 campaign games. Games that are played in some sort of sequential order with persistent elements carrying over from game to game. These can be cooperative, solo, some of them may even be one versus all. There's lots of different types of games that can work into a campaign format, but the hallmark of this is that you have many sessions that are tied together in some sort of way to make a more cohesive, completed, full-on thing. But before we get into the number 10 pick, beginning the list, I do have a little bit of housekeeping to take care of. If you'll notice, I have a microphone on here, which isn't something that you typically see in Cardboard Herald videos, but because we're experimenting with some live stream stuff, this isn't live stream, but because we are, and I'm getting used to some different setups in the studio, I wanted to at least, kind of move in that general direction. If this is something that you hate, give us the feedback. If the microphone is not obtrusive to you, also like the feedback there. We're just kind of experimenting around, and I might be your stream boy here soon. Jack Eddy, the stream boy of Cardboard Herald. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the list. Coming in at number 10 is the Grizzled Armistice Edition, specifically the Armistice Edition, because the Grizzled as a standalone game originally did not have a campaign to it. It had an excellent expansion in At Your Orders that really fleshed it out, but then it was repackaged into the Armistice Edition, which introduced this campaign mode. It's really a light campaign, but the reason why I wanted to include this here is, one, it's a beautiful game, and two, the Grizzled kind of hits in a different way. It has a different vibe than most campaign games, or most games in general, really. But it gives this beautiful story told of this band of brothers supporting one another throughout the First World War. You have persistent traumas that you have to deal with. You can get perks, you can earn bonuses, you can banish cards away if you fail. You have a limited amount of control. There's a cool save system, and it's kind of unlike any other type of campaign game out there. So I really felt like it was a worthy inclusion. Plus, Armistice Edition has those incredible minis. I mean, they're not even minis. Cool Mini or not should rename themselves to Cool Statue or not, because these are practically statues of that awesome Teen U artwork. Number 9, we are on the Tale of Ord by Post Curious. This is another kind of genre-defining game. I'm throwing all of the weirdness at the bottom of this list here, but they are part of my top 10 favorites, so these are notable inclusions. But the Tale of Ord is a narrative mystery in which you play through in several chapters, ultimately coming to a brilliant conclusion. And in this, you're not so much having persistent elements that carry over from one game to another. There are some materials that do get called back and referenced in future puzzles, but more than anything, it's the knowledge of what information you've obtained and the skills that you've developed in trying to build up on these initial puzzles. It's done in such a way that you probably wouldn't have all the tools in your noggin in order to crack open these puzzles at the very end if you didn't have the initial walkthrough at the earlier stages. Now, this may be the only one on this list that is just fully unavailable out there right now. I believe Rita Orlov of Post Curious has retired the game and has come out with subsequent games, which are also quite good. But this was such a foundational experience for me as far as kind of opening my eyes as to what games could be. And it was such a brilliant campaign that I had to include it on this list here. Number 8 is the most recent game on this list. Brand new, the hotness. It is Veilwraith by All or Nothing. This is set in the gloom of Killforth and Shadows of Killforth universe. However, it is its own system, and it is a solo-only game. The hooks for the campaign are almost purely mechanical. You do get to have some persistent elements that carry over, some modifications as you go from session to session to session, and it's relatively light. There is a fail mechanic that you only get so many retries before you are kaput, Well, you're already a Wraith, so I don't know if you can die even more. The game is so fun to play, and the ambiance, the theme, the overall tone of the game, not just the monochromatic look, which is super cool, but just the vibe itself provides enough of a thematic structure that you don't need that tight narrative. And as I said, playing the game feels so damn good. This is an excellent campaign game, and one that once you complete the 5 sessions in the box for the campaign, even without the expansion, it's worth kind of diving into again. It's one of those ones where you could just play several games in a row, or just play one game, come back to a little bit later. Now, number 7 is Seventh Continent. Look at that. There's some symmetry, some beauty, some poetry to including it on the list, but it did legitimately fall at 7. I didn't actually structure everything just so it could be there. The Seventh Continent is a weird choice in here because there's only one game. It's not like you complete a session at a given time and have to stop at that point. You could theoretically start early in the day and play through the entire game in one continuous session without any interruptions, but that's impractical because that could take hours. That could take more hours than are in an entire day given the scenario that you're playing. And the individual scenarios don't have persistent things between them, but the game is designed in such a way to encourage you to take save points, to stop and break down the game. It's a brilliant game of exploration and survival. There's so much discovery, but there's also so much pain in the game. It can be brutal to play and then get hours invested into a scenario after multiple sessions and then die and have to restart over and over again if you're in my case. But the rewards of playing it are really there. It feels like an incredibly rich game to explore. Number 6 is kind of like the Grizzled in the sense that it didn't initially have a campaign included, and that is Scythe with the Rise of Fenris. This was the 3rd expansion, the final expansion as far as main content, not the modular board, but main content for Scythe, and it introduced a campaign that had a story element to it and tons of different legacy-like assets to it. There were new factions that were introduced. There's new mechanics that are introduced. The new factions are wild compared to the existing factions in Scythe. It presented so much stuff, and the story itself was really cool. This was the first time in which a fully multiplayer competitive campaign really made sense to me as a developing story, and it really works. I love the persistent elements. I love trying to win the campaign, and the discovery, the sense of getting all those new goodies and seeing what they are behind those closed boxes is really wonderful. I think that probably peak Scythe for me personally. My favorite times playing Scythe were associated with that campaign. Number 5 is also a recent game to come out. Not quite as recent as Veilwraith, but it is still hot and great and fresh off the presses, or relatively fresh off the presses, and that is Adventure Tactics by Letterman Games. What we have here is a simple, fully cooperative framework that you can interact with kind of in a Gloomhaven type of sense, where the enemies are automated, they have AI, but there's going to be cards that drive specific things that they do on their turns. All of that is pretty good. It's pretty great. It's not the best developed, but what makes this game sing is the ease through which you can interact with the game, the options that you have available, and the persistent elements. Oh, man. Not only are there cool campaign aspects, like if you found a key as part of a mission that may have been kind of like a side bonus objective, that key may lead to you having access to circumventing certain other scenarios, or being able to have access to different in-between scenario loot. Also, the character development is unparalleled. The depth and richness of being able to up your job class or switch to job classes as you gain levels and get instructed on what to do based off of the appropriate level card feels so immersive and satisfying as you're doing it without feeling obtuse or like a ton of work or baggage. I am so excited every time I gain a level in this because my capabilities are changing, but also I get so many choices on how to branch out. There's prerequisites for certain classes. Getting to new classes that are more advanced classes is so cool, and it just all works seamlessly. Adventure Tactics really blew me away in how characters are developed, and the framework of the game supports it quite well. Number 4 is the Lord of the Rings LCG. And I know I may get a little bit of guff for this because a lot of people would say that, yo, if you're going for one of the FFG LCGs for a campaign game, you gotta go with the Arkham Horror LCG. And yeah, it's good. I like Arkham Horror, but I really haven't played enough of it. Like, I kind of have a campaign going with a friend, and it's pretty good. But Lord of the Rings is a game that made a monumental impact on me, and I love both the internal campaign aspects of just the original kind of starter packs, the original base set packs in which you would go through 3 or so sessions and then continue that throughout the cycle and have some persistent elements, though you could reconstruct a deck. But also when they reinvigorated that with the saga packs, which are really the story-laden packs in which you have the ability to carry through with story elements and like story items and that kind of stuff, that's when it really clicked. In particular, I loved the ones that are associated with The Hobbit. I thought those were done so well, and they're incredibly challenging. And as a card game, it still hits all those wonderful strategic and tactical notes and deck building in order to overcome certain objectives, but it's fully cooperative. And I play loads of card games, from Magic to Legend of the Five Rings to Netrunner, all of which I've completely loved, but never has a cooperative game quite hit the kind of strategic element in the way that Lord of the Rings LCG does. So that plus campaign makes it onto this list. Sorry, Arkham. Maybe if we did this in another year or so. Number 3 is Pandemic Legacy, because it has to be Pandemic Legacy, and you could really take your pick here. Maybe I would go with Pandemic Legacy Season 2 just because it felt so original and interesting compared to Pandemic Legacy Season 1 and 0. If I had to go with only one, I would say the first, because it's really the OG. It's what introduced the Legacy cooperative campaign to everyone and completely blew everyone's minds. And yeah, there are other cooperative Legacy games out there, and yeah, there are other Legacy games out there, but this is the one that really opened people's eyes to what campaign gaming can be. It was fantastically put together. It was full of discovery. It had great challenging scenarios that you had to overcome. And it was just an amazing paradigm shift within tabletop gaming. So it has to be on this list. It's one of the games that's easiest to recommend if someone's like, yo, I'm relatively new to tabletop gaming and I want a game that carries over from one session to another. What do you recommend? And almost anyone can find something to love about Pandemic Legacy. And there's 3 of them. I mean, you could carry it over into 3 separate campaigns. It's great. Number 2 is Star Wars Imperial Assault. Part of this is that I have a nostalgic connection to it because some of my favorite times gaming with friends have been with the Star Wars Imperial Assault campaign, in which I was the evil empire and they were struggling to defeat me. And to take this classic Descent format and then revisit it in this Imperial Assault vein, which is really kind of like Descent 3rd edition. There were a lot of really smart things that were done with it. The side mission integration, the bonus missions, the ability to inflict missions upon enemies, the stuff that goes on between scenarios, the leveling up, the kind of ability to get your special perk as the hero. There's so many cool things in this campaign that were done incredibly well, but it goes beyond that. They came out with fully cooperative map-driven stuff that could be done if you don't want a one versus all game. This is really the peak version of the Fantasy Flight mentality towards dungeon crawling, story-driven narrative campaigns. I've played few things like it. It just flows incredibly well. It looks fantastic on a table. It's just an amazing game. And number one, you know what it is. It had to be here. It is Gloomhaven, the big daddy itself, which I should say that I don't know that this would be number one if it weren't for a little game called Jaws of the Lion. Yes, Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion is kind of the appetizer that you can serve into diving into the depths of the big daddy, the Gloomhaven with all of its rich characters and discovery and depth of gameplay and branching paths and everything. There's most of the best elements of Gloomhaven in Jaws of the Lion, but it also has a much better UI. It streamlines so many things. The scenario books are incredible, and it just contextualizes Gloomhaven in a bite-sized, snackable way that people can enjoy if they don't want to dive into the OG itself. And the OG is there for the person who wants it all. You want it all at once. You want to be able to bench press your games and get some gains out of it. So this may be kind of cheating, but I'm recommending Gloomhaven as the whole thing. The game is so unbelievably designed. The AI for the enemies, the interesting story elements that you have to interact with, the choices that you have to make, the retirement of your characters, the discovery of new elements, the system through which you interact, the tactical decisions that you have to make, the pressure on you just hits on so many great things about tabletop gaming in general. If you were someone who was wanting a really approachable dungeon crawl game, it's hard to go wrong with recommending Jaws of the Lion. And if you want just that mind-blowing overall cooperative gaming nirvana, then it's hard to go wrong with Gloomhaven. So it had to be my number one favorite campaign of all time. And that's going to do it for our list. I hope you enjoyed that. I want to hear from you. What are your favorite campaign games? What did I miss on the list? What are your beefs with my own listings? Take me to task. I'd love to hear about it, and I'd love to hear anything else that you'd like to see as a top 10 list. So with that said, thank you so much for watching. I've been Jack for the Cardboard Herald. If you enjoyed this video, we have all kinds of other reviews, interviews, and recommendations via writing, podcast, and video here on our channel and website cardboardherald.com. Our content is audience supported, so if you want to show your support, please visit our Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Cardboard Herald.